All right, you are good to start, Rachel. Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to try to go over some stuff with insurance here. I want to make this as conversational as possible because I know insurance can be a snooze fest. It is probably on purpose, very confusing. So if you have any questions as I'm going through some of this stuff, please let me know. I'm happy to stop. So don't hesitate. I'm going to try to go over some of the other stuff too that goes along with insurance. And essentially what I should have probably titled this as getting DAAs approved and paid for your patients would have been a more appropriate title. So I'm going to try to go over some insurance stuff and then some of the manufacturer copay and assistance stuff. So that'll be my ultimate goal for today. So medication access, how do we get them prior auth? I'm going to start with our regional insurances. And I think we're all pretty familiar. The West Virginia Medicaid is our largest insurer in the state. So I always like to take a second here and say that their criteria tends to be the most strict. So if you're setting up order sets or protocols or things for your clinic on what do I need to get the prior authorization approved, I would go with the Medicaid criteria, because if you have everything that you need from a Medicaid standpoint, then you're going to have everything you need for every other insurance, whether it's Medicare, other commercial payers, and so on. So with West Virginia Medicaid, they set the criteria, but the prior auths are done through the Rational Drug Therapy Program, or RDTP. So I have the link to the website here. It's kind of ugly looking, but that will open up the PDF and then have everything inside of it that you need to be able to get your patient's prior auth approved. The PDF will have more hyperlinks in it to all the forms that I'm going to talk about, and have everything available for you for the criteria and the things that you need, as well as the different formulary agents that they have and when the appropriate use is. So their preferred medications are going to be the authorized generic of Epclusa, so sofosbuvir, velpatasvir, and Mavorite. Those are your two options for West Virginia Medicaid patients, unless there is some underlying medical need to use one of the other direct-acting antivirals. And their criteria, a couple of things to highlight. You have to submit their prior auth request form, fill that out to completeness and sign it, as well as the patient provider agreement. I have the snippet of that. Those of you who have done this before are very familiar with that. Also have to have documentation of Hep A and B immunity, and that can be through previous infection or vaccination. So they will accept titers and the vaccine series administration documentation. I will say here that with hepatitis vaccination, it doesn't have to be complete for you to submit it and get approved. However, if they notice that there is a gap and a patient is overdue for their Hep B vaccine in that series, they will deny it, or essentially pend it is probably a better term, until that is continued on. So they may wait until the patient gets a subsequent second or third injection in the series to move on with the prior auth, but it's not a hard stop that you have to have that full series complete from the get-go. But they do accept either the titers or those vaccine administration documents. And then they want recent lab values, particularly for the viral load, as well as the fibrosis score. And their cutoff is 6 months, and they are kind of sticklers about that. So if it's, 6 months and a week, there's a good chance they'll ask you to get an updated one. So make sure that those are as up to date as you possibly can for submission. And once your patient is approved, I always like to highlight here that they can fill at any willing pharmacy. Does not have to be a specialty pharmacy. Medicaid has an open book as far as the patient's choice goes. It can be a community pharmacy, specialty, whatever pharmacy that you want. So long as that pharmacy is willing to buy the medication and dispense it for the patient can fill it there. So for the FQHCs and other places that have a pharmacy, these can be dispensed for Medicaid patients directly from there. There's no limitations like we're going to see with some of the other insurance providers in this state. So to kind of highlight some of the stuff from the criteria standpoint, this is a screenshot of what that patient provider agreement looks like. So if you guys that have done this before, it looks very familiar. If you haven't done it before, the top portion is for the patient, what they're agreeing to. The bottom portion where I've highlighted here is what you as the prescriber of the medication are agreeing to. So the patient has to agree that they're going to complete the full treatment therapy. They're not going to abuse drugs. They're going to use multiple modes of birth control to avoid pregnancy, and then agree to follow up with you. And then your portion that you're agreeing to is that you will get SBR labs from your patient and submit those to West Virginia Medicaid, understanding that if they don't get that, that may prevent the patient from being treated in the future should they fail treatment. So this has to be submitted with all of the paperwork for that prior auth to be approved. And then The subsequent letter you get after treatment, if you guys have started getting these when you're treating patients, this is the template for that SBR-12 request form. So they send this out to you. Everything that is red here is filled out with your information and the patient's information. They usually send this out in triplicate, and they start sending it out when the patient should be due for their SBR-12 labs. So the patient, whether they have 8 or 12 weeks of treatment, West Virginia Medicaid is able to time that appropriately. So it's going to be 12 weeks after their treatment is over when they start sending it to you. So then you fill this out and a copy of their SVR labs, their viral load, and send that back, and they'll document that they've gotten this and that's complete. Any questions on that so far? All right, probably pretty familiar to most of you at this point. I'll also cover Public Employee Insurance Agency, or PEIA, covered lives. This is a lot of folks in West Virginia. These are our state employees. UHA, I think, still has PEIA, a lot of the colleges and universities. So again, if you have everything for Medicaid, you're going to have plenty as far as information to get approvals through PEIA. The difference here is that their prior authorizations go through Express Scripts, or ESI. So I have the phone number listed here to call them. Usually they initiate that over the phone and then have you submit the labs and the case number after the fact. So you can provide them all of the viral load and labs and things that they want after giving them some of that information over the phone. And then their formulary is going to be the Express Scripts formulary, which is Brand, Epclusa, Harvoni, and Zepatier. Those are your 3 options for patients from a treatment standpoint. And I have it here listed that they have to fill through contracted pharmacies. Express Scripts contracted pharmacy is a Credo. So a lot of times their forms are going to say the patient has to fill through a Credo for your PEIA patients. There are some local pharmacies that have contracts with PEIA to be able to fill some of these medications. So if you already have a relationship with a pharmacy and want to try to use them, it's definitely worth asking if they have a contract and you can fill for PEIA patients. We up here at WVU Medicine, our pharmacy has contracts to fill for PEIA patients. I believe, at least historically, Marshall Health has had an agreement with them, so filling at their pharmacies is an option as well. So I always recommend to ask and see, because when you get the prior auth approval form back, it's always going to say they have to fill with a Credo, because Express Scripts wants you to send those prescriptions to a Credo. So it's always worth an ask. And lastly, just touching on some of the Highmark plans, there are a million Blue Cross Blue Shield plans available. One of the more common one here in West Virginia is the Highmark West Virginia, that's available to purchase through the marketplace. And Blue Cross also goes through Express Scripts, or ESI. So that's where their prior authorizations are through. But that number for PEIA is specific to a PEIA line. So I would recommend doing your benefits investigation through whatever the patient's insurance says, like on the back of their card, essentially, to get those prior authorizations started and approved. Their criteria are all over the place. Depends a lot on the plan and the tier that the patient has paid for, whatever the plan they have chosen. Some of the consistent things that we have noticed is that they also want a recent viral load with that 6-month cutoff and some sort of attestation that the patient hasn't used drugs or alcohol in the prior 6 months. We used to see Blue Cross wanting specific drug tests for this. They don't necessarily require those now. Most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, what we see is if you attest to it in your note and we have that clinical documentation and submit that and it says the patient, to the best of my knowledge, is not using illicit drugs or abusing alcohol, they'll accept that. It's a surprise to us when they come back and say that they actually want a drug test for these patients. But similar to the criteria, the treatments that are available are all over the board depending on the patient's plan and what they've selected. I always use an example of a patient. It was actually a couple that we were trying to treat at the same time. I always use this example. I'm pretty sure they were Kaylee's patients, and this was several years ago. So Kaylee, you probably don't remember this, but it was a couple that were trying to be treated together. They worked at the same place, but they had different insurance coverage. They had selected different plans from their employer. So what we had ideally wanted to do was treat them with the same course of medication so that they could be treated together and do it together. But because of those differences in their plans, they actually had to be treated with 2 different medications, which can understandably be kind of annoying, just to try to keep those patients kind of synced up and so that they can do that together. So There's a lot of variability. I'm not even going to try to go through all those plans. There are about 1 million of them, it seems like, but those are at least some of the consistencies that we can see. And depending on some of the factors with the insurer, again, it's through Express Scripts. So Credo is one of their contracted pharmacies. Some of the plans don't have a required contract pharmacy. It depends on who that Blue Cross is administered through. So there are a lot of employers. WV Medicine in the past several years has had Blue Cross as an option. So obviously they want WVU Medicine employees to use WVU Medicine facilities. So that was their sort of requirement. It wasn't a Credo. So you can see that variability there. So we have to just kind of go along with, will the pharmacy pay for it? Do they have any specifics on that prior auth form as far as the pharmacy requirements for the patients to fill? So those are kind of the highlights on some of the insurers and criteria and getting things approved. I want to talk a little bit too about some of the manufacturer assistance if you've not used these. So we've got it in two different forms. We've got patient assistance programs through the manufacturers, as well as the copay cards through the manufacturers. So I'm just going to try to highlight some of the differences on who qualifies for what and what monies are available. So first, I'll start with the assistance through the manufacturer in the form of the PAPs or PAPs, the patient assistance programs. Now, these are for patients that are uninsured, so they have no insurance. They used to be a little bit more flexible on patients that have insurance, but a lot of them have really clamped down and said, if you have insurance, we're not going to approve it through PAP. So mostly this is going to be your patients that are no insurance whatsoever, no way to pay for these medications. And they do approve these on a case-by-case basis, and it's income-based. So when you submit for these, you do have to submit some of the patient's tax information with the forms so that they can review their income status. And largely the income status is really high. It's like 500, I'm pretty sure it's 500% over the poverty line. So somewhere, over $100,000 a patient could be making, but realizing that these medications are expensive and they can't fork out anywhere from $12,000 to $25,000 a fill for the medications and pay cash. So never shy away from, if your patient doesn't have insurance, but they have a really good paying job, so you're not sure if this is going to go through, it's definitely worth submitting to these programs to see what monies are available and if they'll get approved. Usually C patients have pretty good luck with getting these approved through them. And the way that it actually ends up is the manufacturers send the medication directly to you in the office or the patient, depending on what you fill out on the form. So there's no pharmacy at that point as far as the middleman goes. It comes directly from them. And a lot of times they send the full amount. So the full 8 to 12 weeks, depending on the drug you're using and the duration of therapy, they'll send the full amount rather than just going through the hoops of refills and everything else. So I have some snippets here with a couple of the programs. Epclusa and Harvoni go through Support Path. And Support Path is the program for both the brand names, Epclusa and Harvoni, as well as the authorized generics for each of them. So if you can see it on the screen here, it says Gilead or Oswego, which is the subsidiary of Gilead that makes the generic. So you can fill it out and try to, get both, essentially. Say, if you won't do brand, let me do the generic. You fill this paper out. This is a snippet of the paper. You can fill it out online. So I've got the link here for Support Path, as well as their phone number on here. They have an online portal where you can fill all of this out and submit the patient's paperwork, their tax documents online, and do it that way. Alternatively, you can do it this way where you fill out the paper form, have everything together, and fax it to them. So that's the first start for them to review everything and then give you a decision on whether or not they're going to provide that patient with free drug. So those are the Gilead products. And then I have the snippet here in the information for Maverit, which is AbbVie, and they have the AbbVie iAssist manufacturer program. The link is here. It's the same scenario where they have the online portal, but they also have the forms that you can print out and submit everything together after you get signatures from everybody. So 2 options here. Again, I want to stress it's always worth trying to get approval because of that case-by-case evaluation of whether or not the patient will qualify and having that high above income level that they will approve for these patients. Any questions on those before I get into copay cards from anybody?
Hey Rachel, it's Kaylee.
Yeah.
What Medicare and manufacturer supported programs? Because
So
I
if
just saw a patient and his copay, it was for Vosevi though, was like 3,300 a month.
mhm.
And so we were going to start working on manufacturer program, but I just want to make sure that it's going to be covered. Or I mean, not maybe not covered, but like, did they take Medicare?
Usually no. So that's because the patient has some form of insurance. They've really locked down and said this is limited to patients that don't have any insurance.
Okay.
I have another patient in a similar situation now where um, it's it's real frustrating, but the patient has insurance and the prior authorization went through for um, generic Epclusa, and the insurance said no, we have to use brand. So, okay, so we submitted for brand Epclusa, and the insurance came back and approved it. But then when we processed the claim, the insurance didn't pay for any of it. So the patient's claim for their brand Epclusa, which is the more expensive because it's brand, came back and said the patient owned $28,000. That was their copay because the insurance covered not a dime of it. And trying to get that approved through the copay cards and the manufacturer assistants they both denied it because the patient has insurance and it was over the maximum and they won't do anything if the patient has insurance. So the Medicare, our Medicare option is going to be the foundation assistance. And I do have
Gotcha.
some slides on that.
Okay. Yeah, because we just were looking into that, and I think they said the funds had already been exhausted
Yeah.
right now. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so the copay cards here are our other manufacturer option. The difference here compared to PAP is that these are for your underinsured patients. So kind of what I was talking about is that these patients have to have insurance. The copay cards will not cover treatment for patients that do not have insurance. So if they have insurance, copay cards are your option. So what happens here is that we get the copay cards and then the patients we run the claim. After the claim is run, the remaining copay amount, that's where the copay card is applied, and it brings their copay down to $5. So these can be used for your patients that have high deductibles or high copays from the bat, but they cannot be used for any government funded insurances. So we can't use this for Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, those sort of things that are government funded. So another important thing to remember is that these copay cards do have max amounts. So depending on how high the patient's copay is, I rarely find that that's an issue where we can't cover the full treatment. And that's something that the pharmacy should evaluate or at least let the patient know, you have X amount of dollars remaining, your copay is this. It'll either cover it for you or it'll leave you with a certain amount of copay at a certain time. But remember, that's a lifetime amount. So we've run into some issues where if a patient is going to be retreated with a medication or they were partially treated and we're going to treat again with that same medication, it will remember in the program, the manufacturer keeps that patient's information and will still limit them to that lifetime maximum of using that copay card. So Epclusa, and then even the generic, they pay a portion of the cash price of the drug. It ends up being the maximum is like $18,000 for Epclusa that they'll award, and for the generic, it's about $6,000. For Maverit, it's about $12,000 that they approve for the patient. So it's a good substantial amount of money for your folks that have, $40, $100, couple $100 copays. But in that situation that I mentioned before, where that patient has a $28,000 copay, these are not going to cover it for that patient. But these are good options for underinsured. So they have commercial insurance and they have a high deductible or they have a high copay, and this will help them afford it a little bit better and bring it down to that $5. And just a little bit to highlight about some of the copay information for your West Virginia Medicaid patients, their copay should never be more than $3. So West Virginia Medicaid has a scaling system based on their income and whether they've met a sort of deductible from their other prescriptions. So it should never be more than $3. And as I said, any pharmacy can fill it. So your patient has an option there as far as wherever they want to fill it and should be affordable to them for that $0 to $3. Wouldn't have to worry about copay cards, even though they're not applicable here. And for PEIA, I said it is it is a lot of our government and state employed patients through the state, through schools, through the universities. But they are eligible. This is actually a commercial insurance, so they are eligible for copay cards. There's been a lot of confusion about that, so I always like to highlight and bring that up and repeat it a million times, because PEIA, depending on who their employer is, what plan they have, I've seen copays be anywhere from $150 to $3,000. They absolutely qualify for copay cards, and we can get those for them, and they can get their own online and apply through the manufacturer. So copay cards are an option. They should not pay more than $5 if they have PEIA. And then they may be required to fill through Accredo. But there are other pharmacies that, you can try to see if they have that contract where you can, patients can fill with pharmacies that you're already established with or have comfort with. So foundation assistance is kind of the last thing that I wanted to tackle here. So we use foundation assistance essentially for patients that have Medicare. Technically, any patient that meets criteria is eligible if they meet all the criteria for these foundations. But so it could be commercial, it could be government funded, and that's why we usually use it for our Medicare patients, because all of our commercial patients generally can use the copay cards. So this is going to be your saving grace for those Medicare patients when they're open and they have funds. So like Kaylee mentioned, they have intermittent closures now, which is a new thing in the last 6 months to a year that we haven't experienced in the Hep C world. But I have a couple of examples on here. We have the Patient Access Network Foundation, or PAN Foundation, as well as HealthWell Foundation, which are very common ones that we use here at WVU for our patients. So some differences between the two of those, and I have the hyperlinks on here if you want to go to those sites and look at that foundation assistance. PAN will essentially apply or approve $3,250 per year. However, they will let you reapply. But that's an important thing to note, depending on what the patient's copay is, to know, because of the intermittent closures, that if they get approved for $3,250 and that is exhausted, say in their first 1 or 2 fills, and they have a third fill still, they may still be responsible for the difference if we have to reapply, and then the funds are closed at that time. So a better way to say that is making sure the patient has the full amount of what their copay is, or if they don't, that they're able and willing to pay whatever remainder of the copay is with that. We used to regularly be able to reapply, and that was never an issue, but because of those intermittent closures, now it does come up. So we try to have that conversation up front so the patient is aware. HealthWell Foundation does theirs a little bit differently from an approval standpoint. They just mentioned that their maximum award would be $30,000, but it's based on need, and the amount that's actually approved is usually based on the information provided on what the patient's copay and deductible is, because they're trying to spread the dollars out for different patients, they usually award what is needed for that patient. So those are 2 options. If you go to those links, I have it specific to the hepatitis C foundations. Again, they have intermittent closures. Both of them are closed right now. As of this morning, I double checked. You can go to those websites and sign up to be alerted when those funds reopen. So they would send you an email that says, hey, you signed up to know the PAN Foundation Hep C. When that's open, I'll send you an email. Here it is. There's some monies available. Go ahead and apply for your patients. We do that regularly to try to, like in Kaylee's example, if that opens up, try to get those funds secured for that patient for Vosevi so that they can afford it. So these are really good options when the monies are available. And these are, just because kind of a background, the reason that we can use these for Medicare is that they're not specific to any manufacturer. A lot of various manufacturers, as well as other organizations, donate money to these foundations and specify that they are for hepatitis C. So there is no limitation on which manufacturer, which drug these funds are used for, because it's all kind of dumped into the same pot. And I think that's all I had to talk about today. Any questions or anything I didn't cover that you're curious about?
Hey, Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
I was just want to let you know, I'm making sure I understood correctly that you said when they have Medicare, they're like that myabv.com.
Mm-hmm.
We actually had a patient that he has Medicare, and they did approve it, and they covered the full cost of that. So I was just making sure because I didn't know if Kaylee, because I think Kaylee had said, I might have missed the conversation, that part of the conversation, but she had said that she had been trying something, but AbbVie.com, even with Medicare, they did cover the patient's full cost of a medication.
Awesome.
they-
How recent was that, Robin?
It wasn't. It was pretty recently. It was probably, is that from her? It's not been very long because I've only seen him a handful of times, I think.
Okay.
And I'm pulling it up, okay?
Okay. We used to have a lot better success. So, I mean, that's a good point as far as the AbbVie or well, both of the manufacturers from a Medicare standpoint, they used to approve it. We've recently been getting denials for our Medicare patients. And that in all honesty is part of that case by case basis where I said it's worth submitting to see because maybe they will still approve it. We've just had they have some text that says if the patient has any insurance, we won't do it. But sometimes those will get through and they might see like, oh, this patient does have a low income. And they have a high copay. We can go ahead and cover that. So that's awesome.
Okay, yeah. It was on May 16th, so it was pretty
Oh,
recent.
great.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure Haley knew in case she could.
Yeah, if I can't get the Vosevi approved, I'll try maybe Maverick for 16 and see if AbbVie will give me a better response. But thank
There
you.
go.
So
All right. Does anybody else have any questions? That was a really good didactic presentation, Rachel, and very helpful, especially, in those different extenuating circumstances. I'm really sorry if you just heard a child in the background. So now we are going to go ahead and move over to our case presentation. It's going to be presented by Robin. Let me get that pulled up here. All right. Oh, one more second here. All right, I'd like to thank you, Robin, for presenting that case, and Kaylee for helping her work through everything. And I want to also say thank you, Rachel, for presenting your didactic today. And I appreciate everyone that got on with us to listen and take part. That's really big in helping us to be successful. So we are going to finish up for today, and our next session is going to be July 25th, and it's going to be HCV in Women of Childbearing Age by Dr. Feinberg. So thank you all, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.